Sleepy Joe opposed both the China and the Europe travel bans. You know that. He opposed the China travel ban that I instituted very early and the Europe travel ban that I instituted.
Just get out of this. I mean, this is just, the president just lied 4 times in a row, and I just cut it short because we don't need to hear him lying. He says Joe Biden has been wrong every step of the way. Was he wrong in January when he penned an opinion piece for USA Today, warning of a coming pandemic, warning that many lives would be lost if the president doesn't get his CDC and build teams around this to combat a virus? Was he wrong? Or were you wrong when you went to the CDC spewing your germs all over the place, saying if you can get a test or you want a test, you can get a test when no one could get a test? Or maybe were you wrong when you said it would just go away miraculously? Maybe were you wrong when you said it was just one person coming from China? Maybe were you wrong when you said perhaps you don't want to use this Production Act to mobilize a nationalized response to testing and contact tracing, like other countries have done, and their numbers have gone down. And while you might be keeping the testing numbers down by slowing down testing, which is just utter stupidity, talk about ditzy. Talk about a ditzy, stupid, botched response to a pandemic that is killing tens of thousands of people, over 160,000 right now. This is on you. Many of those deaths, Mr. President, are on you and your terrible response to this virus. Obvious, terrible response.
Those near the Portland Police Association building, this has been declared a riot.
Welcome to War Room Pandemic. It's Friday, thank goodness, August the 14th, the year of our Lord 2020. Broadcasting live here from Capitol Hill. Raheem Kassam, Jack Maxey, Vishbur on America's Voice.News, the John Fredericks Radio Network, Newsmax TV later on in the day, and subtitled in Mandarin, blown through the CCP's firewall by G News and GTV, the numbers for which are going wild right now. Mainland China consuming this show like no other Western-based show in the world, something we're very, very proud of, and very pleased to have all of you guys on board with us here today, including Stephen K. Bannon and including Mika Brzezinski there, Steve.
Yeah, I want to thank all of our audience in China and mainland China throughout the world. This is what a democracy looks like. Raheem, Jack, Vish, Mika, I guess she got triggered by the president calling her a ditzy airhead yesterday, but she went off the chain. We just gave you a slice. I think it went on for 5 or 6 minutes. But you can see her blowback on the president. The rest of the show today, we're actually going to go through this, from voting to the economy to Dr. Fauci and the pandemic. We pride ourselves on being the first show that came out about the pandemic, and really the only show that talks about everything, that talks about the economy, talks about the science and back of the pandemic, the political implications, the geopolitical, this great confrontation with the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, who basically drove this virus. We're going to have Miles Guo on in the second hour to talk about Giuseppe Tridas, the great doctor from UNESCO, who's written this book that blames the Wuhan lab. So we're going to cover it all today and kind of have a response to lay out the facts about what Mika's all over the president for. So, Raheem, what I'd like to do is bring in Christian Adams. This whole thing, the first thing we're talking about, there's no budget deal. There's no relief package deal. The Democrats have gone home. The Congress has gone home. The Senate's gone home. Washington's now emptying out. There's no deal on the table. One of the reasons for this, the word is, and the president got kind of jumped on yesterday by the media at the press conference, is about the mail-in voting, not absentee voting, but mail-in voting. So we wanted to bring in, I think, the top expert in the conservative movement on this. Raheem, why don't you bring in Christian Adams?
Well, we're very delighted to have Christian on. Christian Adams is the president of the Public Interest Legal Foundation, PJ Media columnist, former Department of Justice Civil Rights election lawyer, and recently appointed to the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. Christian, thank you so much for joining us here this morning. Do we have Christian? No, I don't think we have that yet, Steve. We're trying to clear that line up a little bit, I believe. So we'll jump to Christian when we can.
Okay.
After that
so
great
let's
intro
go to.
and
I
everything.
want your guys' response to me. Yeah, I want your response to Mika. Why was she so triggered this morning? And MSNBC clearly let her go on a 5 or 6 minute riff.
Jack, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but I certainly do. I mean, she was not just going on that rant for what we played. We were actually going easy on you, ladies and gentlemen. The rant went on, I think, for 3 times as long as that. And I got used to this after being on Laura last night, especially, Steve, because I had another guy ranting at me, Chris Hahn. Very similar talking points, by the way. Just saying, somebody circulating the same conversational points amongst these DNC talking heads. But the point being raised by Mika, I mean, I found it ditzy in and of itself, Jack.
Well, and I think one of the key things you talked about, how the DNC and these operatives are sharing talking points. I think one of the key things that she mentioned was an op-ed that Biden penned on January 27th in USA Today. We're going to post it on the site. People can see it. Now, they're going to use this op-ed to claim that Biden was out ahead of Donald Trump on the pandemic, etc. But if you go through this thing line by line, he makes some outrageous claims concerning the Obama administration himself and their performance on the Ebola pandemic, which I think will open up a little can of worms, particularly for their fanboy Fauci.
Look, Steve, I want to get your thoughts on this as well, but here's the thing. If you do something like this, if you go on air and you go to do a rant, you got to do a rant, right? You can't do a half-baked, half-truth. And for a minute, I thought, oh, there's some real fire in her in what we played there and what we can hear. But then the sell wasn't quite right. And the sell isn't right because the product isn't true. The things that she was saying, she says Joe Biden was right about all of this. Now, when you look at what Kamala Harris said 2 days ago in their first appearance together, Kamala Harris says, oh, the lockdowns are Trump's fault, the schools not reopening are Trump's fault, and the economic crisis is Trump's fault. But all along the whole way, Joe Biden was saying, yes, listen to the experts, lock it down, keep the schools shut. It doesn't matter about the economy. This is all about stopping the virus. So I don't know, Steve. Mika didn't seem that convincing to me, and I feel like she played right into the president's hands with this.
Well, I'm not sure that she's backing the right guy here on being, being correct, and that's Joe Biden. I mean, the very first element we saw this with Joe Biden was this whole he opposed the shutdown of the importation of this from the Chinese Communist Party and from China. Remember, President Trump moved on this. I think we started the show, guys, around the 23rd, 24th, something like that, because of Hubei and Wuhan province. I'd actually broadcast with Miles Guo over Lunar New Year up from New York, and Miles was all over this on the 15th and 16th of January, and GTV and others in this whistleblower movement have been talking about this from early January. So we consider ourselves the first. When Joe Biden came out, he was contra, and I want to go through Jack. I want to go through his opinion piece in the USA Today, but he was contra. What President Trump did at that time, we actually were arguing for it. And what he did, and this is off that memo of Peter Navarro, and Peter Navarro's memo, right, talked about talked about the herd immunity. This is what I don't get about Fauci. Fauci was a supporter of that at the time. Remember, Fauci opposed Peter Navarro's memo in late December. Fauci and Azar and CDC, all of them opposed Peter Navarro's memo. Peter Navarro wrote that memo, which has been reported in the press, because he didn't think the public health apparatus was taking this seriously. So Mika and Joe and all the guys on CNN and MSNBC got to understand something, that the public health apparatus was dead wrong from the beginning. It was Peter Navarro, an economist, that wrote this briefing paper, this what they call the memo, that convinced President Trump to go against the advice of the public health service guys and shut down flights from China. Now, why did they oppose it? Remember, they're all globalists, and they have this theory that if you start to shut down travel from an infected area, that you'll only increase it because they'll start to lie and you won't have global cooperation. So WHO Health Organization has kind of as one of its standards for treatment here is to never say shut down travel, which is obviously absurd on the face of it. President Trump did that. And once again, War Room, we didn't think it was as hard as it should be. We didn't think there should be any exemptions. I think there were like 10 exemptions to this. We thought it should be a hard shutdown. And also we thought that maybe even shut it down from Europe right away. So what happened was that Joe Biden came out and he took the Beijing party line. He called it xenophobic. Right. He called it nativist. He called it racist. And so right from the beginning, I don't know how Mika... go ahead.
Let's remember today, Steve, his plan for the future, according to the Biden plan, is that we are going to have full partnership with the World Health Organization. We are going to fund these NGOs to the hilt, and the U.S. is going to become a partner in this new world order attempt to provide health care for planet Earth. Now, we know from experience that the World Health Organization is not an honest broker or an honest partner in this. So I give Donald Trump a lot of credit for taking us out of that organization, and Biden has already announced that we are going to join ourselves at the hip with the organization that betrayed us, betrayed the world because they were doing the bidding of the CCP. It's outrageous.
And by the way, continue to, Steve. They continue to do this. The WHO isn't trying to do a mea culpa. Go ahead.
Yeah, but let's go. Mika's got another problem. With this. Remember, at the time, Fauci was just off of Newsmax TV and the John Catsimatidis radio show saying that there was nothing to worry about here. That's kind of what he told the president. And also his theory from the beginning, guys, you got to remember this, was all herd immunity. But at the time he's saying we could pull the Catsimatidis quote is from the 23rd of January. The reason I know that is John Catsimatidis owns WABC, contacted me and says, hey, your impeachment show is on fire. What are you doing this? What's a pandemic? Why are you doing it? And I explained it to him. I said, it's the biggest thing in world history. It's going to change the world. He goes, oh, well, I know a guy should have on it. He knew Fauci from his time. He was a supporter of Bill Clinton. He knew Fauci from those days. Fauci comes on WABC on Sunday and completely dismisses the whole reason we have a show. Totally dismisses it. That's Joe Biden and Fauci in the last week of January. And I don't know how Mika works her way around that Donald Trump, who takes fairly dramatic action by shutting down China against all of his public health advisors' advice, and it turns out to be the thing that probably in all this helped us to dodge a bullet the most, she says he's wrong. Everything he said up there yesterday, he's absolutely correct on. Now, is it everything? We were, as you know, and he actually mentioned at a press conference one time, when we said 30 days to crush the virus, we're always much more hardcore. You know, we wanted to stop travel out of New York. We wanted to make sure nobody, they didn't infect Puerto Rico, that South Florida wouldn't start to infect people. We, as you remember, Raheem, and Jack, we were much, much harder core than this.
Yep.
But
Steve,
the president's actions were pretty dramatic, and I don't know what Joe Biden's got to counter that.
Yeah, Steve, we've got to go to a break now. We've got a packed out show for all you guys watching, listening across all the podcast platforms, YouTube Live, Facebook, all over it. And I just noticed something, guys, when I went to look at Mika Brzezinski's Twitter page. She's blocked me. So that's fun. We'll be back with more War and Pandemic in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Well, 2020's been a gut punch to American business, and if you're going to succeed, you need every possible advantage. Smart companies run on NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system. You can get a free guide right now at netsuite.com/Bannon. Welcome back to the War Room. Raheem Kassam, Jack Maxey, and Stephen K. Bannon, joined in this segment by Larry Lindsey, CEO of the Lindsey Group. Steve, why don't you take it away from here?
Yeah, we're going to have Christian Adams, had a little technical problem. We're going to have Christian Adams on later in the show to talk about voter integrity in this vote. It seems to me that this is what was one of the big things that drove the reason that we don't have a deal. And I don't understand this. To me, getting the fourth leg of this relief package was essential. It was essential to this, to the election. It was essential to the American economy. We're going to have two back-to-back leading experts, Larry Lindsey, who is a former head of the NEC, National Economic Council, which is basically essentially the senior advisor to the president in the Bush administration. Larry, walk us through, where do you think the economy is today, given your analysis of unemployment? Because it's even kind of tough to figure out who's unemployed, who's not, who needs money, and who's not. So let's start with that. Where do you think the economy is, and where do you think we are with the joblessness number?
Yeah, I think the economy is rebounding, or excuse me, has rebounded quite well. We got more good news this morning on retail sales, which were up again. We've made back probably 2/3, perhaps more, of the decline in consumer spending we saw at the beginning. But let's face it, the reason for that, and this I rarely say, is the government response. Money went out to households. Unemployment benefits were raised. So, ordinary people now have money to spend. And, therefore, retail sales are up. Same thing's true in the labor market. We've had a very solid rebound in the labor market so far. We have, if you look at continuing claims, how many people, last week were still collecting unemployment. It's down 9.5 million since the bottom of the economy in April. Yes, that's only 40% of the way back, but hey, it's only been a couple months. So the economy is going strong. You won't hear that on a lot of the media, but the economy is going strong. It is important that we continue the strength of the economy, and we need to continue supporting household income.
Listen, I know you're a free market Republican. You've been a great advisor to Republican administrations and also to one of the most sophisticated guys out there for the hedge fund community. And we understand this is extraordinary times. The reason we do this show, the pandemic triggered an economic crisis that then triggered a capital markets crisis, and we've done extraordinary things. I mean, think about it. We're talking about the bid and the ask on a relief package of $1 trillion to $3.2 trillion. Larry, those are numbers that just boggle the mind. I know, even up to a year ago, you wouldn't even consider a fourth package to have this type of number. But the reason the economy is rebounded, just help our audience out here, is the infusion of cash from the federal government, both the $3 to $5 trillion bazooka that was aimed at the capital markets through the Fed, and then this trillions of dollars that we've done in relief packages. Can the economy continue to recover unless you have continued at least to bridge this gap on aggregate demand until we get people back to work? Don't you need another relief package in some form? Or is the executive orders the president signed enough? I always looked at those executive orders as a means to an end, a means to force the Democrats to the table. It looks like they could end up being the ends unto themselves. What are your thoughts?
Well, the executive orders certainly did help the economy. I think they probably did a quarter to a third of what a reasonable package would do. And that isn't nothing, but there's no question the economy and American households would be much better off if we got a decent relief package. And I'm sorry to say that, politics is getting in the way of the health of the economy and the health of American families.
So what would you recommend to the president right now? Everybody's gone home. Nancy Pelosi, to me, the tell was when Nancy Pelosi said, hey, since we're leaving a little late, we're going to take another week off, so we're not back to September 14th. Given where we are, and it looks like there's no deal, and I'd like to get your we didn't have Christian Adams on. We had a technical problem. We're going to get him on later about this post office and the mail-in votes. Do you think that's important enough or big enough, this issue about mail-in votes, to walk away from a deal that would infuse the economy with a couple of more $1 trillion to see you through Election Day?
Well, I know that he talked quite a bit about the extent of fraud. and there is a lot of fraud. We had a New York primary. We had a quarter of the votes in Brooklyn declared invalid. Patterson, New Jersey had a local election, all mail-in ballots. 20% of them were fraudulently cast. In Michigan, we had 30,000 ballots going to people on the rolls who were not living where they were said to be living, and 2,400 of them were dead. So, these are mind-numbing numbers, and I understand the concern. I don't think this is hard to work out. I think that on voting, you've got to have some integrity. I'm all for that. I think what you need to do is have people actually request the ballot so they know it's coming, so it doesn't you don't have ballots going to dead people. And I think there ought to be a ban on vote harvesting, which is basically going around and saying, oh, I'll fill out your ballot for you. That's kind of what it amounts to. Those are exceptionally bad things to have them running. There's nothing more wrong with mail-in voting. You can do it now. You just apply for an absentee ballot. That's all you have to do. If they want to make it a little easier, that's fine. But your question was really, was it worth holding up the deal? This is above my pay grade to make decisions like that. I think that Speaker Pelosi knows that the worse the economy is, the better it is for her party. And so I don't think she's going to rush to the table. And I think she's, at the very least, holding out for a good deal, one that will impress her caucus and keep her in as Speaker next year. If my advice would be, the best thing to give her, unfortunately, would be the $600 unemployment number check. It is not good for small business. I agree. And I think that we should demand something in return, such as liability limitations, which I think are very important to small businesses. So I think a deal is there. If you got these guys in a room, locked the door, and you gave somebody, a whip to keep them into line, I think you get a deal in 20 minutes. But it's egos and it's Speaker Pelosi's calculation, which I think is a correct one, that the economy is good. A bad economy is good for her party.
Last question. We've got about a minute left. Can we really open up the economy until the liability issue is dealt with by the Congress? Can that happen, Larry? Is the Congress going to have to act on this?
Well, a lot of businesses have reopened, but they are keeping their fingers crossed. And, the tort lawyers never come in when things are opening up. They wait a few years and then come in and, like vultures, pounce. And right now, I think everyone is optimistic. Everyone wants America to work. And they're giving the Congress the benefit of the doubt. In the end, we need liability limitation, or we're just going to, kill this economy.
Larry Lindsey, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your insights and your advice. So thank you very much, Larry Lindsey, formerly from the head of the NEC. Raheem, Jack, you see how important this the voter integrity is. We're going to have Christian Adams on later. We got Peter Morici coming on into the next segment. But I'd like to hear from all the hashtag War Room Pandemic crowd in the live stream. Particularly like your thoughts on the Mika, on her attack, really a 5-minute, unvarnished attack on the President of the United States, calling him essentially a liar about how he's handled the pandemic.
Steve?
We'd love your response on that throughout the show today. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to
try to put some stats up.
Yeah, we got about 90 seconds there. I just wanted to ask you the question. That Mika rant, to you, did that symbolize the entire coterie of the attack lines and the attack angles that the Democrats are planning to use? Did she just give their whole playbook away in one 5-minute segment on the pandemic attacks?
Yeah, I think that coupled with the attack on you last night on Laura Ingraham, they just want the hook. And here's the reason. Look, remember this show, we transitioned out of War Room Impeachment to War Room 2020. We flipped it immediately to where we're in pandemic. Why? I said, hey, this is going to drive everything. Remember, the economic package we're talking about, the mail-in voting at home because people, quote unquote, don't feel safe. It's all tied around this event that changed the course of modern history that was driven by the Chinese Communist Party. That's why we keep talking about the CCP, right? Their plan for global hegemony dealt around. Part of it was about this virus, and this is where her attack line, I think that's what the campaign is going to come down to. I think it's going to come down to the actions of the president versus the rhetoric of the left.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Steve, we've got to bounce to a quick break now. As Steve mentions, Peter Morici will be joining us in the next segment to discuss this. And CDC Director, by the way, gentlemen, Robert Redfield, warning that America is bracing for, quote, the worst fall from a public health perspective we've ever had. We're going to get into the economics and the politics of that in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Well, 2020 has been a gut punch to American business, and if you're going to succeed, you need every possible advantage. NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system and a sponsor of this show. Smart companies run on NetSuite because it gives you the visibility, control of your financials, your HR, inventory, e-commerce, and more. Everything you need all in one place. So whether you're doing $1 million or hundreds of millions in sales, NetSuite lets you manage every penny with precision. You can control your company, compete with anyone from anywhere, right from your phone. So join over 20,000 companies who trust NetSuite to make it happen for them. NetSuite surveyed hundreds of business leaders around the country and assembled a playbook of the top strategies they're using as America reopens for business. So get that free guide for yourself. It's called 7 Actions Businesses Need to Take Now. And schedule your free product tour at netsuite.com/Bannon. That's netsuite.com/Bannon. You're back in the war room, and when we left off in the last segment, I mentioned what the CDC director, Robert Redfield, said in a WebMD interview that he did on Wednesday, that America is bracing for, quote, the worst fall from a public health perspective we've ever had, end quote. Want to open that topic up to Stephen K. Bannon, bring in Peter Morici now, professor at University of Maryland. Steve?
Yeah, we're going to have Dr. Peter Morici, I think one of the top economists in the country, and a columnist, got a great column over at the Washington Times. Going to bring him in a moment. But I want to go to this quote. This is the administration. Somehow we got to get on message in the administration. I mean, the CDC goes out and drops another bomb, particularly when you think about the situation with liability. Until you get the liability structure, when the head of CDC saying we're going to have the worst public health situation in American history. And remember, we had the 1918 pandemic, the Spanish flu. So I think that this is a clarion call for people got to get focused, people got to be ready, and particularly on the economic side, how we let Congress leave without having a relief package, and particularly liability reform. It's this is one of the reasons. Remember, college football, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 already shut down. I think we're waiting on what's going to happen with the ACC, the Big 12, and the of course, obviously the SEC over the next couple of days. But hey, if I'm a university president, I got it out. If you tell me it's going to be the worst public health crisis, I don't have liability reform. You've got all these progressive universities. You got all the presidents got a perfect thing to say. Nope, going to shut down all college sports. I want to bring in Dr. Morici right now. Just I think a guy that really gets him back to the analytics. We had Larry Lindsey on. I think also one of the top economists in the country. He was not quite at the sense of urgency that you need to do a deal, because he does think the economy is coming back. He thought it was very smart. He recommended the president do it. But Dr. Morici, my question to you is: can the economy keep this recovery going unless we get another relief package, whether it's $1 trillion, $2 trillion, whatever the number is? Don't we need another relief package as another infusion of cash, particularly the working class and lower middle class people, to kind of make sure that aggregate demand is there? What are your thoughts on where we are?
It's going to be much more difficult if we don't get another infusion of cash for unemployment benefits. It doesn't have to be $600 a week. That's more than they were earning. But something like $350 would be in the sweet spot. And it has to be something that's going to be there for a while. because this isn't going to resolve very quickly. We're going to have a very tough fall before we get a treatment or a vaccine. And so we have to prepare ourselves for the fact that a lot of people are still going to be shut in for a while, if not by purpose of government order, just voluntarily. I mean, they're just not going to want to, people aren't going to want to have facing jobs. And a lot of small businesses are gone forever anyway. And people aren't going to be opening up new ones until this crisis is passed. And not to bury the story, but in the big cities, it's kind of tough to imagine anybody opening a restaurant in Chicago right now, or Portland, or those places. These issues have got to be resolved.
Dr. Morici, the president used the executive orders. We thought he was using them as a means to an end to force the Democrats to the table. It looks like it may be an end of itself. Let's go back to that unemployment. The way it works right now, the $400, obviously using the FEMA account, I think it's $40 or $50 billion. You can pay $300 at least for some period of time. Do you think the president's executive orders do enough to actually sustain this recovery that he's generated in the economy, or do you need to deal with the Democrats?
You need to deal with the Democrats for several reasons. One is he's paying $300 a week. The states would pay $100. He's only got enough money for about 6 weeks in that $44 billion from the emergency fund. So that's not long enough. And it's not long enough for people to feel particularly secure about spending the money when they get it. The other thing is, remember the deep state? Well, we're getting it. I mean, think about it. The state unemployment agencies were doling out whatever it is they dole, plus 600. So the president is saying, well, I'll give you 300 for a little while longer. So all you really got to do is cut that 6 to 3 and keep sending the checks out. And they're saying it's going to require weeks of computer programming and head scratching and bureaucratic manipulation and so forth. Either they're the most terribly incompetent people on the planet, or they can't divide 6 by 2 or something, or they're really just passive resistance. They don't want to do this. I think to some degree, the Democrats have decided it would be good to really see the economy go to hell so Joe Biden can get elected. I think that's what this really comes down to.
So, Dr. Morici, last question. If you were in the Oval today talking to the president and knowing that Congress has gone home, we are where we are, what would you recommend that the president do?
Declare a national emergency, pay out $400 a week, make it very difficult for the states to say no, and basically set up a structure in Washington real quick at the Commerce Department, saying if you're not getting a check from the state, come here and we'll give you a check. I mean, if Mnuchin could get the IRS to put out the stimulus checks that way, he probably could get them to put out these checks as well. Now, would there be some fraud? Yeah, but that's the way it goes. Now, if Nancy Pelosi wants to take the president to court and say he's overstepped his constitutional authority, then think about it. She's the one that's turning the valve on the economy. The idea is if Barack Obama could do DACA the way he did, Donald Trump can do this. Where the Republicans made their mistake on DACA wasn't challenging it early enough in the courts, right when it got started. With this thing, if she challenges it early, she loses. And Donald Trump gets reelected.
Dr. Morici, last thing. You were at a major university in the Mid-Atlantic area. This liability issue, you've seen the canceling of college football, this major cultural aspect of American life. They've walked away. Congress has gone home. The Senate's gone home. What happens on this liability issue? Do you think the economy can start to open up? Do you think the universities can really start to open up? We can have sports and all that until the liability issue gets sorted either by the president or by an act of Congress.
Well, the universities are opening up. We're just not playing sports. And we are opening up to the extent that basically local conditions permit. What's the infection rate? My university had to push back in-class undergraduates for about 4 weeks because Prince George's County in Maryland's got the worst infection rate, the way they measure those things. So we are opening up and basically taking the risk. I think that most small colleges and universities are not that vulnerable because they don't have much to sue for. Harvard's something else. If Harvard makes a bad choice makes what is perceived to be a bad choice and gets sued, it's got deep pockets. So it's more vulnerable than the vast majority of universities that don't have much endowment at all. So, we're opening up. And I think businesses, if you look around, they're opening up. They're just pushing ahead and figuring they'll hire lawyers. If Donald Trump's reelected and the economy pushes forward, I look to see some lawsuits because, after all, the torts lawyers are Democrats. If Joe Biden's elected, we might get a lot less of that.
Dr. Morici, thank you very much for joining us. Realize you took time from your day off, so thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Nice to be with you again. All the best.
So, Raheem and Jack, I want to bring it back into the studio. The president, this is kind of a bet the administration move here on the economy. My belief is Nancy Pelosi's pulled this thing like crazy. If she thought it was to the advantage of getting a deal done, they'd be in New York. The mainstream media would be clamoring. People would be going crazy. But you don't hear that. You hear crickets. I think her strategy is to bleed the president out. Now, obviously, there's different thinking in the White House, particularly about this issue with the voting, but primarily about the recovery. And I guess the feeling is right now we can make it and stay robust and stay on this V-shape incline that we're on without another major infusion of cash, and that would be in the closer to the $2 trillion number. I know the president's very upset that they had all kind of bells and whistles and things not related to the pandemic. He's absolutely correct there. Our question is this economy going to continue to come back like it's been coming back? And quite frankly, I think it's kind of miraculous what's happened so far. Can it continue to come back unless you have that last, what we call, bridging element over the span, particularly for aggregate demand? Dr. Morici said, hey, guess what? It's not going to end anytime soon. You're probably going to need this even into next year. Raheem, Jack, love to have your thoughts on this.
Well, Steve, two things struck me from this. Number one was how prescient you were, and Raheem, I think in like show 2 or 3, talking about how liability was going to be at the heart of this, and we're really seeing that play out now. And number two, he said if the president used his $44 billion of the money that he could apply for the emergency powers, that would last 6 weeks. That would bring us back to when the Democrats are back in session. Am I correct? And that could kind of force their hand, it seems to me.
It does force their hand. Here's the problem. If you pass something then, I don't think the money can get out to the public before. Remember, this is why we wanted Christian on, is that November 3rd is not Election Day. November 3rd of 2020 is the last day of the election.
Right.
People are going to be voting. There's absentee voting. There's going to be certain mail-in votings in certain states. It's just going to happen. In October, people are going to be voting. And I think that if you wait until mid-September, they're not coming back to the 14th. The tell on this thing to me was when Nancy Pelosi said, take another week. Yeah. Don't come back to the 14th. That means, Jack, you're exactly right. That's when the money from FEMA, that $44 billion runs out on President Trump's executive order. If you make a deal with the Democrats then, it takes a week or so to do it. You get it done late September, early October, there's not enough time to get the cash into the system. My fear is that this could be a bet the election move, and people obviously have access to more numbers than I have, but it's made me feel very, very, this thing was very important to get done. Navarro's on TV last week talking about the $2 trillion deal. I thought there was an area of compromise, and remember, I know small government Republicans' heads are blowing up when you're throwing out numbers like we're throwing out trillions now, like we used to throw out billions. It's obviously it's a problem, but I think you got to deal with this emergency.
Maybe this is a silly question. I'm not an economist. I'm not even a finance kind of guy, Steve. So maybe this is a silly question, but correct me. And so correct me if I'm wrong, if it's not worth considering. But is there another way to do this that isn't just cutting checks? Is there a public works program? Is there, a full suspension of all tax payments, of sales taxes, anything like that could put money in people's pockets?
Well, gets back to what Steve Cortez said. Remember, Steve Cortez said this year, don't collect taxes. Just step away from the taxes. That immediately goes into people's pockets. Steve, the Trump trillion that Navarro talked about a month ago, that difference between the $1 and the $3 trillion was going to be things like 5G. There were going to be things like, massive public works.
Let's talk about it more when we come back from the break. The war and pandemic crowd is on fire in the live streams. Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, Stephen K. Bannon, Vish Bora return after this short break.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. I've just noticed the live link to the show is up at the top of the site on citizenfreepress.com. We're very honored to have that privilege, and thousands more people pouring into the live streams on the show. Here it is Friday, 14th of August, the year of our Lord 2020, broadcasting live from Capitol Hill. I want to throw it over to Stephen K. Bannon. We have our guest, J. Christian Adams, president of the Public Interest Legal Foundation, joining us on the line. Over to Steve.
Yeah, Christian, we want to have you on to start the show. Sorry about the technical problem, followed by two top economists, but this is why we want you on. It seems like the Trump administration, the president's made a decision to kind of walk away from this negotiation on this massive relief package. And one of the centerpieces of this is this issue with the post office and money. So you're the top voter integrity guy for the conservatives. What exactly is going on? What's the issue with mail-in ballots? What's the issue with the post office? And in your mind, as an expert, was it worth walking away from another relief package that could sustain the economy?
Well, look, to the left, Steve, mail-in ballots is the miracle cure for Joe Biden getting elected to the White House. This is how they think it'll happen with mail-in ballots. They want $4 billion more from the taxpayers to fuel their mail-in ballot plans. It is worth walking away from, because this is how the left twists process. They know that mail-in ballots will cause chaos, will delay the outcome, will empower the lawyers to rush to court to fight over ballots. And the reason is we know that mail-in ballots fail. We now have data from Nevada, from the primary, showing numbers that are astonishing of failure.
So walk us through the math here. Walk the American people through right now. What is the math that shows about mail-in ballots? When you say it's a failure, you're one of the top experts. Walk us through why it's a failure.
Okay, let me talk about Clark County, which is Las Vegas. We got the data. The Public Interest Legal Foundation went and got this data from Clark County. They just had a primary in Las Vegas in June. 1.3 million ballots were mailed out. That's 1.3. Remember the number. Those ballots went out to all active voters. Many of those people are dead, many duplicates, but 1.3 million go out. Guess how many come back? Only 310,000. So there's 1 million ballots out there floating around that never even, who knows where they are. So 310,000 come back. 7,000 of those get rejected. 7,000 get rejected. So these are 7,000 disenfranchised voters, don't even know they're disenfranchised in Las Vegas. And 223,000 ballots, Steve, just in Clark County alone got bounced as undeliverable. In other words, they went there, it was a bogus address, a bad address, the person didn't live there. That's a busted system that doesn't work. We can't elect the president that way.
Well, look, let's focus on that election. What votes actually counted? The 1.3 million they sent out, only the 300,000 that came back. Is that what actually, when they voted,
That's right.
When they counted the vote that day, only 300,000 counted?
And this is just Clark County. This is just Vegas. I've got it for Washoe, which is Reno, but let's focus on Clark. 1.3 million go out. Only 303,886 got counted. 1 million ballots are floating around Clark County right now, somewhere. Who knows? That's part of the problem. Remember, the post office, Steve, says that their goal for the post office is to be 96% successful on mail ballots. That's a 4% margin of error rate. That's the margin of error in 10 states in 2016 for 124 electoral votes.
So can you give some other examples? Larry Lindsey had mentioned briefly, but we'd love to carry over to the next segment. Can you give some examples through the rest of the country where this has been tried because of this pandemic over the last couple of months, and what have been the results?
Well, you can also look at the disaster of Maryland and D.C. They decided to go to a mail election. They decided to shift to mail voting. They had no experience doing it. This was just, let's create something. And so the ballots in D.C. and Maryland got lost. People didn't get them. They got misdelivered. They never showed up. They never got cast. And so what happens next? People go to vote on Election Day because they never got their ballot. And there were lines like 5 blocks long because they thought it was a miracle cure, and they reduced polling places. So it was a complete calamity. But Steve, don't think that's not what the Democrats want. They want chaos. They want calamity because it empowers their litigators in court to go try to let the lawyers decide the election.
So before we get to the litigation part, where do we actually stand as of today? Walk our audience through. Where do we actually stand? People know about absentee ballots. You've always got the option of doing that or going to the registrar and trying to do that. But on mail-in, what states are in play? What states are they even talking about doing mail-in voting?
Well, I'll tell you what the most dangerous ones are. Who cares if Oregon does mail-in? Which they've done for a long time, by the way. Oregon was one of the leaders in it. But places like Michigan are starting to do mail. Wisconsin is starting to do mail. Pennsylvania is tinkering with it. Nevada is definitely going to do mail. That's a real disaster in Nevada. The problem, here's something else that's happening. The left has begun funding state election offices and local election offices. You won't read about this anywhere, but the left has begun dumping millions of dollars straight into local election offices like Kenosha, Green Bay, Milwaukee, Madison, to help get those offices and those officials to do what they want. And it's an unprecedented philanthropic development that nobody's reporting on. And so you have disasters waiting, like Nevada and Michigan are the places I'm most afraid of.
Christian, you talk about the lawyers. Talk about, isn't the left really prepared? We had a guest on last week to talk about the left's already got a whole legal strategy set for the election day, the night of the election, to just go into court immediately and start suing.
Right, gentlemen, we may...
Right, and they've already filed...
Christian, sorry to interject here. We're up against a hard break, but we'd really appreciate if you'd hang over the break to answer that question. If you can stick with us just a couple of minutes, we'll be back with the next hour of War Room Pandemic. We do have to go to a break here. We're very grateful to have Christian Adams, president of the Public Interest Legal Foundation, on the line with us here on the War Room today on Friday with Stephen K. Bannon, Raheem Kassam, Jack Maxey, Vishbor, and the whole team. In the next hour, we'll be getting into the pandemic. Well, Fauci, more, Calais, the UK, Nancy Pelosi's staffers working for the CCP. Miles Guo will join us on the line. So a lot to do here in the next hour. Stick around. We'll be right back.